if you take your past as raw material, something you can sculpt and change and narrativize, if you're making a movie of it or you're writing a story about it, you get to change your relationship to it because you're turning it into something that is neither true nor fiction. It is something that, it's a creation, it is, and it's something that you can own and take responsibility for. So I started looking at artists who use their own biographies as, and like looking at different people. And I originally, like most curators and working on a project, I made a list of like 30 artists who were using their biography and using some relationship to the past in their work. And I decided to keep winnowing this down into artists where they had really, the relationship to biographical history and pasts was so conspicuous and did something I wanted to be able to discuss. I wanted to be able to discuss in looking at this. So we ended up with just 3 artists, so 3 solo shows, 3 where you get to see an artist's work in depth. And I also said, like, someone comes in the downstairs gallery, misses the introductory text and just sees it as 3 solo shows, 3 terrific artists to meet and get to know, that's fine. The overall theoretical rubric is less important to me than the individual artists, but it was just an organizing principle. And it's one of those things when you start looking at it in all art forms. I had a bunch of poet friends here last night who were saying that poetry is defined as biography without spaces, like where it's just all the detail collapsed together. And you look at films that use biographical detail, and we know it's not documentary, it's not just the facts, but it's something else. I'm going to talk for Lily van der Stokker here because she was not able to come. She's one of, and one little thing here. We have an artist who's Houston-based, an artist who's New York-based, and an artist who's European-based. And I love that relationship. I love the fact that from different parts of the world, people come together to do these things. So Lily is an artist. I have known her work since she started showing in New York in the early 80s. And she was living in New York at the time. And I think of her as like the Samuel Beckett of visual art, because she likes to make things as simple as possible, so simple that they are, it sort of short circuits your critical faculty, your critical ability to look at it. Lots of curlicues and daisies and very lighthearted things that will often have a really dark underpinning. So she came to do a site visit about a year ago, and she's like, well, and she was like, I'm not really sure because my work doesn't deal with nostalgia at all. It's more of a philosophical exercise. And I said, yeah, I totally understood this. It was not nostalgic even when things look cute. And she went back to Holland, to Amsterdam, and she started working on proposals. And what she's best known for is these wall paintings. And she sent me a couple proposals, but this was the one she felt most strongly about. And it's just the phrase useless movement in this kind of grand way. And useless movement is a really fascinating phrase because, like, 4 years ago, you were rushing around like crazy. You were running appointment to appointment, and you were trying to get something done. And you can't remember what it was. Whatever it was doesn't really matter to you anymore. You might have accomplished it, you might have failed. It all just goes into the quagmire of the past. But she said she didn't want to see this as a negative in any way because it's not useless while you're doing it. It's the way we're wired is to try to accomplish as much as we can at any time. There's a scene in Angels in America that where this guy is wrestling with an angel and who is trying to get him to accept his mortality. And he's like, no, you wired us to want more life and to want more experience. So you can't, the way we get through the world is always running for that next thing, that thing that we want more than anything. And I'm sure all of you are going like, I wonder how long this talk is gonna last because they've got 6 things on my to-do list this afternoon. That's the same thing. There's always more stuff in your to-do list. It's never all done. And you keep going, you keep going. And also when you see particularly when you're with elderly relatives who are at the last years of their life, and you see them slowly letting go of the things that they would spend all the time fighting for and trying to get done. It's this thing where, like, you know, at a certain point you release it all and you let it go. I'm gonna go, if you have to spread you out for 1 second here. These drawings, which is how most of her work begins. The three drawings on the right are particularly poignant to me. And they're little and they're beautifully done. You have to sort of walk up to them. And they're the Jack and Lily drawings, and she's done about 30 of them. She had a long-time life partner, Jack, who was a curator, video artist, and a sort of person around the New York art scene. Even though they were both Dutch, they lived in New York. And Jack died about 4.5 years ago now. And so the drawings say things like on them, like, Jack and Lily live now 5 years together already. Jack is 60, I am 44. Lily is 41, Jack is 57, and they live together now for 10 years. The drawings were not necessarily done, and most of them were not done at the time they're describing. Like the one in which she said she's 41, she did that when she was 50, because she's just looking back at the past and all the different stages of relationship. Like when you think back with your romantic life, whoever you're with now, or if you're single, and you think about like, oh, who were we when the first year we were together? Who were we on the third year we were together? What are all of those different combinations you make with another person? So the Jack and Lily drawings, I think, are really incredibly poignant, particularly once you know Jack. She's continuing to make them, even though Jack's been gone for a few years now. And he had one thing she shared, which we didn't put in the final text because it's sad in a way that is hard to just sort of put in. He was a Holocaust survivor. He survived, his family was killed, he was a child, he traveled across Europe on his own to try to get back to Holland. And he had, because of that, of the experience of what he saw as a child, he had night terrors his whole life, where he would wake up screaming. And in the last few years of his life, dementia had set in, and his memory started to fade. And he didn't remember his relatives, he didn't remember what his childhood in Holland looked like as much, but he also stopped having night terrors. So what happens when forgetting the past actually releases you and gives you a new freedom in the world? So, which is another sort of philosophical question I think runs through the show. So we're gonna go around this corner now to JooYoung Choi room. I said JooYoung just got here, right? Yeah, okay. We're gonna go around the corner. Hey JooYoung, you made it. Oh, okay. Here. Let's go right in front to.
Okay.
Okay. Now, we're going to do 2 mics, just hand it back and forth, or okay. This one.
They have a.
Oh, you got the thing on you. Okay.
A body mic.
So I only have to do the Donahue mic. Okay. Everyone, this is JooYoung Choi. If you've been going to see art around Houston for the past couple years, you've definitely seen JooYoung's work. She is shown at a lot of our great colleague spaces, Lawndale Art Center, Diverse Works, Project Row Houses, Anya Tisch Gallery, which is right down the street, Front Gallery, which is also walking distance from here, a lot of shows. And when I first considered you for the show, what I was focused on mainly was you were doing these things, it was after the Diverse Works show, and these things that looked like the public access TV shows, the homemade shows that I grew up with. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's that history, oh I know that history. But that wasn't totally what you were about. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship to your biography?
Oh yeah, well let me pass these out.
Sure.
So I brought some friends for you guys to hug, and then you can pass it to the next person and hug and play with. So Let's see. So I guess it all began with my thesis in graduate school.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, can you guys hear me? Okay. Is it my mic? And he's. Hello.
Much
Hi.
better. Yes.
Is that?
Let me maybe just move it here.
Is that better? Yes. Okay. So I wrote my thesis on imaginary worlds. Specifically, there's a fancy term for imaginary worlds called paracosms, which is a highly structured imaginary world that the creator knows is not real but feels responsible for. And so it started as a basis to create paintings. So instead of working towards the whims of fashion and trends of what was popular at the time, is to really create a set of standards that were individual to what has been valuable to me since I was a child. So digging through a bunch of I used to make books as a child. I was a really bossy child, so I didn't know how to write, but I would have my babysitters write the words, and then I would draw the pictures of the epic stories of Jupiter Moondog and the Moondog Pirates. And so I went through all these books I made, and through that I was able to create this world and all of these characters. And it started as paintings, but then I started to realize there's nothing worse than a piece that shouldn't have been a painting and it should have been a video art piece. There's nothing worse than something that was forced to be a painting, but it should have been a puppet or a sculpture. And so the world just continued to get bigger, and I got to learn more and more different skills with video art and sculpture and puppetry through the world that I was creating.
Yeah. And you grew up, you were adopted and ended up in Concord, New Hampshire.
Yep.
You were one of, you said like 50 Asian faces in a city of 25,000 or something.
Yeah.
So you kind of were already sort of like living in your own, keeping your own company, and before you actually went back to Korea and learned your much about your country of origin, you were creating your own world in Concord.
Yeah, I think I was trying to connect the dots. There were so many absences in my life, like not knowing who my birth parents were or where I really came from, that I started to use my imagination to fill in a lot of those gaps. And the only place I had access to understanding what Asian meant was the television, because we didn't have the internet yet. So anyone who had black hair, who looked a certain way, I thought was by people. So I tried to learn Spanish. I had Spanish records, and the lady on the cover looked Asian to me. I thought Elvis was actually Asian when I was little, because he had black hair.
Oh, that's true.
And,
yeah.
You know, and so. But it made for an interesting way of growing up, where anytime I did see someone who looked like me on TV, they were always doing something extraordinary. Like they were a figure skater or Connie Chung. And I just thought, oh, well, to look like me, you have to do something special. I really thought that there was something about that look that meant that, I better figure out what my specialness is. So I think it launched me into this world of wanting to find out what was my special thing that I could do in my life. Which was kind of neat.
So the cosmic womb was this name for the larger world you've created, and there are characters, and I've spent a long time thinking about your characters now, and I can't trace all their relationships. There is a wiki page you've created that where you explain all of the relationships of, except that you haven't updated that for a while, so there's characters that have emerged since the wiki page.
Oh my goodness, yeah, with each show it seems like more characters seem to pop up. The original characters were all based on, when I was adopted, they had a photo of me as a baby with kind of a little mugshot. It's like a black and white photo with these numbers and letters, and it said K83 3696. And so the main characters are all named after the parts of the code. So this character's named Lady K, and the sound for K is called Kyok in Korean. So there's Queen Kyok and Lady K. So you have the Korean K and the English K. 83 is a scientist. 36 is this flower character. Let's see, K83, 36. 9 is this awesome sword-wielding character, and 6 is this rebel over here. And that became the basis for the characters, kind of the idea that the parts of the self are broken up into all these different roles that we play in our lives, of being the rebel, being the scientist, being the nurturer. And that was kind of the beginning genesis of these characters.
And when you've been doing these shows over the last 2 years, people have come in and they've related to your characters, and they've also reinterpreted some of the characters.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what happens when other people's interpretations enter your mytho universe?
It's pretty magical. I mean, sometimes people will convince me otherwise. Maybe I'll really think I know a character inside and out, and then someone will come in and explain to me, oh, no, this character's not a villain. Like, this character is just lonely, they need a girlfriend. And I'll be like, oh, I never thought about that. Oh my goodness, what kind of girlfriend would this character even have? Or would they have a boyfriend? You know, so it would really make me stop and think about the character. And sometimes I'll be in agreement with them, and other times it just makes me realize how much I really feel a character is a certain way within my world.
And there's certain characters that have emerged from the beginning that may or may not be surrogates for you. It's like C.S. Watson is the one who seems to be you a lot, but she's not really.
You know, yeah, C.S. Watson, who's in the video, she's the one that wears blue in the checkered outfit here. She kind of was the jumping off point for me. She was the first and only known Earthling to teleport from Earth, and she just happened to be from Concord, New Hampshire, and just happened to be adopted like me. So she's the closest thing to an avatar. But it's been interesting as I focus in, like I've really zoomed in on Spasia, this character here.
Who's it's always got the white polka dots, black body.
Yeah. That we've become very close. And a little boy who comes and paints with me on Sundays, he's 10 now, I've been teaching him since he was 7, he looks at Spasia and is like, oh, that's you. So, because he wasn't around when C.S. Watson was my main character, so he doesn't even identify with her being me. It's always this character that's my teacher. Whenever he sees that, he knows it's me. So it's interesting how it's each, I mean, in a few years I may focus on a different character, and then that character will become, I'll embody that character more.
And Spasia Tano appears to be on a date here.
Oh yes, this is the happily ever after. So, you know, she's, as you can see, there's many different adventures that she's gone through in each of the paintings, and I thought it would be really wonderful for her to have her moment. Kind of at the end of Snow White, they ride off on their noble steed, and I thought, you know, I just don't think a horse is the happily ever after for me. I was like, what would they ride off into the sunset on in the cosmic womb? I was like, oh yeah, a brontosaurus, of course. That's a perfect steed for them to ride off on. So. But
why is the brontosaurus covered in flowers?
So, since I was a child, when I found out that the brontosaurus was no longer a dinosaur, because the paleontologists decided, what, in 1907, that it was going to be the apatosaurus. But people had the first drawing, scientific drawing of a dinosaur was a brontosaurus, and it was labeled brontosaurus, and like people loved the brontosaurus, the term. So when they tried to switch it to apatosaurus, nobody cared about the apatosaurus. It was something about that name that we loved. And so since the 70s, they made it not a dinosaur, then it was a dinosaur, and then in the 2000s it was a dinosaur, then it's not a dinosaur. And I just thought, there's moments in our lives where maybe people make us feel like we're not as real as we'd like to be, or validate our significance. And this character kind of symbolizes that going back and forth between being recognized for truly who you are and then being denied being who you are. Yeah. And I thought, even as a child, I thought, well, where does the brontosaurus go when we don't believe in it? You know, so I thought, well, the brontosaurus can come to the cosmic womb and hang out there until humans get their act together and let it be a dinosaur again. So every time that it stopped being a dinosaur on Earth, it went to the cosmic womb. And one day, this dinosaur named Perennial Favorites was looking down at the ground, very sad, and said, you know, I just wish I could be something real. And she saw a flower on the ground, and it was a forget-me-not, this flower. And she said, you know, I really wish I could be a forget-me-not, because then they won't forget me on Earth. And magically, all of the different perennials, which are the flowers that when you pluck them, they sprout up again, then all the different perennials started to grow on her. And so everywhere she goes in the cosmic womb, a garden of perennials will sprout up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm someone who cannot hear Puff the Magic Dragon without crying when it gets to the line about dragons live forever, but not so little boys. So. No. Can you talk about a little bit about the rocks?
Oh, the potato rocks.
Yeah.
So I had done an installation at San Jacinto College, and I thought I had painted all these clouds, but I guess I didn't do the measurements right. So there were these weird shapes kind of in between where I had stuck these paintings, and I had gray fabric, so I just jammed that in there, and I had a bunch of googly eyes, so I glued them on, and someone said, "What's that?" I was like, "Oh, it's a potato rock." And so then with this exhibition, I thought, we'll make three-dimensional potato rocks, and then when I was playing with them, they sounded so nice when you put them over your head, and I thought, oh, it's almost like you could sprinkle some inspiration. So if you're having like an artist block, you just get a potato rock and you shake it over your head, and it like kind of seasons you with good ideas. So if you need an inspiration, you
shake
can.
them over strangers.
And I think that goes into the fact that play is so much a part of this process, where I think I got a character down in my head from the two-dimensional, but it's not until it becomes 3D and you're playing with it and, I don't know, shaking it over your head that you realize, like, oh, this is so much more than I thought it was.
Yeah. And, you know, I remember entering things like movies so fundamentally when I was a kid. And, you know, we're screening Who Framed Roger Rabbit because my first studio visit with her, at the end of the visit, she hands me, she's like, "This is very important, take this with you." And it was a VHS tape of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And I no longer have a VHS player, but I still have this object that somehow is like this meta piece by you. And then, you know, one of the other movies that came up, which we should probably screen too, the lyrics in that, living here in the, what is that from?
So the lyrics of that are from The Wiz. Which, if you haven't seen it, is an absolutely amazing film. When I was little, I was the first Asian American Dorothy of Concord, New Hampshire's community theater. And so it was such a trip to be 12 years old, and I got the ruby slippers and everything, and my friends' parents' friends were dressed up as like the Cowardly Lion, and it was real, and we were all playing make-believe with adults, and oh, it was just so magical. And then as I got older, I started to think about, you know, I started learning about race and identity and all these very complicated things. And I was like, where is there room for fantasy and all of that? And then I found The Wiz, and it was this beautiful amalgamation of those two important issues of fantasy and imagination, but also making space for the realities of race. And so while I was working on that painting, I listened to The Wiz the whole time, so probably about 15 times in a row, and singing along. And this song is called, it's called Home, and there's a line in it that says, even though this world may not be real, it taught me how to love, so it's real to me. Yeah. And I thought, what more perfect of a lyric to carve into this, to have vibrate and echo through it, since I feel like that's so much of what echoes through me when I'm making my art.
There's another quote from you that I love quoting. So saying, like, having an imaginary friend is such a great thing. Why do we only let kids do it? Why is it only reserved for kids? So I do encourage you, inspired by JooYoung Choi, to go out and make sure that if you've abandoned your imaginary friend, your Puff the Magic Dragon, your, you know, your characters, go ahead and say, come back to the house. I'm sorry I abandoned you when I turned 12 and puberty hit. But, you know, it's like, I need you now.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with that.
Any questions for JooYoung? Okay. Thank you so much. We're going to move to the last room.
Okay.
And we're going to Jack Early now.
Hey. Hi, how are you? Good. Congratulations. Thank you. Oh, you can put it just down there.
Your work is so wonderful.
Oh.
It's amazing. Like, I just came out of childhood, you know,
Okay.
and like it just reminds me so much of like
There's a lot of people.
magic of life.
Oh.
It's just seriously so wonderful. And your jacket, like everything.
I'm sure it's good.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm glad you enjoy it.
Okay, now everyone, this is Jack Early, an artist I have known since the very earliest days of his career, and and this piece was very fundamental in conceptualizing the show, because when I first saw this, heard this, and realized he had set a goal for himself, because Jack also writes songs, of telling his life story in 20 musical minutes, and it is like you've used your biography from some of the earliest works,
In this piece.
No, in all of your work, you know, because, I mean, this is Jack's family on a porch. Jack's 2 aunts, and there's a little Jack there. I mean, he looks exactly the same, don't you think?
Except.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk about deciding that you wanted to make your biography into a sound piece.
Yeah, I always thought it would be neat to see if I could, well, you know, the idea is an old one. It really started to, I wanted to see if I could tell the history of the world from the Big Bang to now in under 20 minutes, and it's impossible. A few years later, I thought, well, maybe I can tell my life story in under 20 minutes. And I did it. So if you listen to this, you'll learn a lot about me.
Yeah. But there's one point in it which I always talk about with you, that he's a kid, they're going to see an air show at the state fair, and there's an accident, and one of the parachutists, his parachute doesn't open, and he dies, and the family leaves the fair just in silence, and nobody talks about what just happened, which just seems so authentic for me. Like when you see that kind of stuff as a kid, and your parents are like, we have no idea how to talk about this, so we're just going to not talk at all. Yeah.
And that's really true. And I just want to interject. I'm really lucky to have two of my back door neighbors here, and one of their wives here with us today. And it's really true. Lindsay, that worked at the Gulf Station, his parachute didn't open. Isn't that right, Gray? And you knew Aunt Liv very well, didn't you?
Yeah. So, and this was not in Texas, it was in North Carolina.
This was North Carolina.
What town?
Rocky Mountain, North Carolina.
I mean, you can't make that crap up, you know, the fact that it's called Rocky Mountain, North Carolina. Yeah. Tell me the story about the dog again. I love the story about the dog.
Well, Gray and Julie and I and some other kids in the neighborhood, there was a stray dog, and we sort of took it in, and we were raising some money with it, selling lemonade. And my dad insisted that we take it to the vet, and well, we had been calling the dog Barney, and when Dad brought it back from the vet, he said, well, guess what, it's Barnice. And he let us adopt it. So Barnice was my dog for a while, our dog for a while.
Yeah, and you know, making your family huggable is kind of incredibly cute too. Like I mean, but they do seem awfully huggable. This is an affectionate piece.
Yeah, that's true. And thinking about bean bags too, that we all kind of sat in.
Yeah.
And punching bags.
Yeah. Now, we've had a number of seen by you that have used this wallpaper, this revolutionary wallpaper, and I had a similar wallpaper when I was growing up. Can you talk a little bit about how you ended up getting this wallpaper?
My mom said, honey, we're going to wallpaper your room and you get to choose it. So she took me to the wallpaper store, and I think that was when I knew that art, that's the first time art blew my mind. I sat down and was able to go through, you know, she took me back day after day to go through wallpaper samples, and just the knowing that you could choose colors, like, you know, you could choose between orange and brown race cars, or green and gold race cars, or there was the blue and red race car option, and knowing that you would paint the trim of your room to pick up on one of those colors, and your bedspread would pick up on one of those colors, it just really blew my mind. Of course, maybe I wanted the colorful balloons or the daisies, but as an 8-year-old gay kid, I knew that the toy soldiers would offer an air of masculinity, so I chose those. And we ultimately painted my bedroom furniture blue. That was the color I picked up. And when I was thinking about being a gay kid, I knew I wanted to make these paintings because, you know, you discover those kind of things usually in your bedroom. And I spent so many times maybe crying in my bedroom or being worried in my bedroom, thinking what was going on. I also spent a lot of time in my bedroom thinking about the sneak peeks I had just taken at, you know, summer camp or out of of my babysitters. And so I would burn, in those days you had to burn those images in your mind because you got a quick peek and that was it. And so I think I would lay in bed and think about those things. So I knew I wanted to sort of project those images onto my bedroom wallpaper. Working from an old family photograph, I was able to do that. And we took the soldier images and reworked them so that they were clear enough to be turned into a silk screen, and changed it a little bit. I made 2 of the soldiers hold hands. And yeah.
In my case, the wallpaper, even though I was on my own in the room, I wanted bunk beds. I'm not quite sure why.
Me too.
So I slept in the bottom bunk, and I had this like little thing, and I could see the wallpaper. So I was surrounded by my Revolutionary War soldiers, and I also grouped them into couples. You know,
Your wallpaper wasn't fooling anybody though, Bill.
No. I couldn't pull the butch thing off as a kid. No. Now but then you've also done a new color scheme for the wallpaper.
So about a year later, I was going to have another show, and I had not fully finished this project in my mind yet, but I knew it was coming to an end. I wanted to make what had been these male figure paintings sort of go psychedelic, rainbow, and burn out. And so I switched from the male figures and the original colors and turned the soldiers rainbow, and moved towards more other things that maybe I obsessed about as maybe a younger kid, like popsicles and Lucky Charms and laters.
Yeah. One of the best things was when you showed up at the opening at the gallery, you got cookies with the popsicle painting like printed on the cookie. Mm-hmm. And none of us wanted to eat the cookie, so we all have these things slowly desiccating on our bookshelves now. I think mine appears to be fine, but one day it's just going to explode.
Yeah.